Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays. The first Sunday of every month I actually do a video called Subscriber Sunday where subscribers send in photos of things in their yard that they're proud of. If you're interested in sending in photos for that, the email address is right here. That video will be the first Sunday in March at this point. Make sure that the emails that you send me with the photos say something like subscriber photos, something like that. It makes them easier for me to find when I put that video together every month. The rest of the Sundays, like I say, I do garden question and answer videos. You can ask questions down below this video that I will answer next week. Before I get to the questions from, actually from 2 weeks ago, because last Sunday was Subscriber Sunday, I do have a giveaway announcement from Corona Tools. Corona doesn't sponsor me and they don't pay me anything. They do send me tools that I use in the videos pretty frequently. I've used Corona tools since I was a landscaper. Long time ago. I don't know, for 30 years I've been using Corona tools and they are my favorite. They sent me this extendable pair of loppers here, which I'm sure you'll see me use on the channel several times. And they sent me this folding saw, and frequently you'll see me use this folding saw. And in yesterday's video I actually used it to cut some roots on an encore azalea that I was planting. Maybe able to see back here, but a lot of uses for these folding saws, and they fit in your pocket. So I use them very frequently. But what we're giving away here, and what you guys want to hear about, is these Corona Pruners. These are 1-inch pruners. They're steel construction. These have a replaceable blade, and they have an internal spring, which is what I really like about these. There's no spring sitting out there, so they're not going to get damaged. Single nut on the back of it takes it apart, and you can replace the blade and the internal spring if you needed to. Limited lifetime warranty on these. This is a super nice pair of pruners. This is really the nicest pair of pruners I've ever given away on this channel, and one of their higher end models. If you'll leave a comment below this video, it can be the question that you want answered for next week, or just whatever random comment. Makes no difference what the comment is. You'll be entered for a chance to win one pair, okay? Then you can have a chance to win a second pair by going over to my Instagram at HortTube, and follow me on Instagram, and then make a comment on today's post, which will be me, holding a pair of pruners like that, and that'll give you a second opportunity to win. And then go over to Facebook, facebook.com/HortTube, and same thing, find this video and make a comment below it. 3 pairs of pruners. 3 different places to enter to win those. Next Sunday's question and answer video, I'll do the drawing for these. So thank you very much, Corona, for participating in the channel. Okay, on to the questions. Somebody asked me, they've got this insect, a little red and white spotted beetle on their Rose of Sharon. This scentless plant bug is one of the coolest insects. They actually sent me a photo on email that you can see here. This is one of the coolest little insects. It's an insect that actually eats the seeds of things in the Malvaceae family, or the mallow family. Mallow includes okra, cotton, hibiscus, and many of the plants, ornamental plants that we love for flowers, and then also edible. So it's a pretty damaging insect, but I find I'm always interested in insects that evolve to do one thing, and this insect eats the seeds and flower buds of just one family of plants. It's just kind of interesting. They want to know how to control this insect, and you can spray it with some sort of pesticide, and it can be an organic pesticide or a non-organic, whatever you want to do. Just do me a favor and do not spray the plant when any flowers are open, because the other thing about the Malvaceae family is pollinators love the open flowers on okra, on hibiscus, on everything, on your Rose of Sharon, which is also a type of hibiscus. So make sure, look for them before they start to set buds and before they open flowers, and then do whatever control you're gonna do on this particular insect. Get it under control. Like I say, before the flowers open, because we don't want to be spraying I don't want to tell anybody to spray a Rose of Sharon or something with open flowers on it while the pollinators are around it. But interesting that an insect would evolve to do just one particular flower on one particular group of plants. Somebody asked me about going ahead and fertilizing early because it's been so warm, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. If you're using an organic fertilizer, it doesn't really matter. If you put it out early, It feeds the micronutrients in it feeds the microorganisms in the soil, and they're not awake. And so if you put your organic fertilizer out right now, it's just not going to do anything. It's just going to kind of sit there until the soil starts to wake up. So one good thing about it is it won't feed them when it's not an appropriate time to feed them. So if you wanted to go ahead and put it out, you could. Not going to do anything for you if the soil stays cool. If you're using inorganic fertilizers, then you know, that's a different story. I probably would not do that early because it would just go right to work and potentially wake your plants up. Somebody asked me about, they've got a really wet area at the bottom of their yard, and we're talking about putting in some sort of gravel at the bottom of a trench to drain it off. You need really, if you're going to use some sort of gravel drain to drain it off, you need to build a French drain. You need to put like a 6-inch corrugated pipe that has a sleeve on the outside of it, which you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's. You can either buy the 6-inch corrugated pipe that has the slots in it and then put basically what it amounts to, it looks like a sock over top of it, or you can buy it where they're already assembled, where the 6-inch corrugated pipe with the slits in it already has the sleeve on the outside of it. Sometimes they even have some foam pieces on the outside of it, and you lay that in the trench. If you just put gravel in the trench, this clay soil will fill it in over time, and so it might be effective initially, but the soil will eventually just work its way into the rock, and your rock will become backed up and clogged up, and it won't be any good any longer. But yes, you're onto the right thing, but you need to put some sort of pipe and a sock around it to prevent soil from intruding it. Somebody asked me about using sulfur. They got some gardenias, and their soil is alkaline. Gardenias are heavy iron feeders. They want a low pH, and iron is kind of locked up in soil if the pH is too high. And so things that like a low pH, things that like acid soils, can be off color and yellow in alkaline soils, and they want to know about using sulfur. Sulfur is kind of a temporary fix, and the problem is if you've already planted the plant, and this is the thing, somebody in the garden center is just going to grab you a bag of sulfur and hand it to you and tell you to throw out a half a cup or whatever. But what if you actually spend any time reading about this, it actually needs to be mixed into the soil. And so if you already have an existing plant, it's a little hard to mix the sulfur into the soil. So it needs to be mixed in, it needs to be moist. If you've already planted, I would think that maybe you could rough a little bit of sulfur in around the plant, but you're probably better off using a fertilizer. You can find fertilizers that are sulfur-coated urea or ammonia sulfate. And so where I normally recommend using organic fertilizers, I might switch to a fertilizer that has ammonia sulfate. So if you go and look at the shrub fertilizers at wherever you would buy fertilizers from, and just read what the ingredient is, what the active ingredient is on the nitrogen. What type of nitrogen are they using? What source of it is? What is the source they're using? If it's ammonia nitrate or sulfur-coated urea, either one of those would help pull that pH down over time. And you can try the sulfur, but like I say, I think it really needs to be mixed in to actually be effective. If you're going to plant acid-loving plants in the future, I might consider container planting some of them. Things like blueberries and gardenias and azaleas, those kinds of things might be best in either raised beds for you or in containers, so that you have more control over it. Somebody asked me about planting some small Muskogee crepe myrtles that they had and wanted to know in Texas in containers. So there's a few things I want to say about this. The small Muskogee crepe myrtles need to go out after the frost, but if they need to be outside when they can be, and so bring them out as long as it's not below freezing every night. But small rooted cutting crepe myrtles are very vulnerable to root freezes and can be damaged very, very easily. I've lost a lot of small crepe myrtles in the wintertime in the nursery business. And so be super cautious with them until your frost-free date, which is probably toward the beginning of April. Bring them out when you can, on days that you can. The other thing is, you talked about putting them in a container. Muskogee crepe myrtles get 25 feet tall, and I'm going to tell you that after about a year or 2 years in that container, they're going to underperform. They're going to be so root bound in a container. It's just not a great container choice. If you're going to plant a crepe myrtle in a container, I would find a dwarf or semi-dwarf crepe myrtle, and not Muskogee, which gets 25 or 30 feet tall. I had a really hard time with that one in the nursery business. We only want to grow exactly how many we were going to sell in containers because they'd only last a single season in a container. Somebody asked me about transplanting azaleas. You can absolutely transplant azaleas. The video that I put up yesterday about planting encore azaleas, I mentioned that on an azalea, most of the roots are in the top 2 or 3 inches of soil, maybe 4 inches. And so you're best to dig as wide as you possibly can. The depth isn't going to matter all that much, but the wider you can go out, the better. Don't dig real close to the plant. A lot of plants you dig pretty close to the drip line and go down like that. On an azalea, I want to go out as far as I can and go down maybe 6 inches and then come back. And you'll see it's like a little pancake of roots. That's how azaleas grow. Go as wide as you possibly can. Go ahead and cut them back a little bit when you do it, which is going to sacrifice this spring's flowers. So if you want to wait until after they flower, you might want to do that. And then cut the plant back a little bit and then go, like I said, go as wide as you can. Somebody asked me about putting an Alabama Beauty camellia next to their foundation. The roots on the camellia aren't going to hurt your foundation, but that is a large growing camellia. So if you have a space that you can allow a plant to grow 12 or more feet tall on your foundation, then yeah, that's fine. There might be that fox. I got a fox over here. If you follow me on Instagram, I've shown pictures of this fox. He's poking his head out over here this morning. You might want to try maybe that October Magic Ruby or something if you only want one that's only going to get 4 or 5 feet over time. But it's not going to hurt your foundation. Keep in mind it gets big. Okay. I get lots of questions about the bulbs coming up early and is the cold going to hurt them? And no, just leave them be. I've had daffodils up here since the beginning of January, and we've had some cold nights here and there, but it's not going to hurt them. Just leave them be. Let me see. Somebody asked me about I get this question a lot because in some of my older videos, if I was planting things in containers, I've talked about not planting things up into very large containers quickly. So let's say you had a little 4-inch pot that you received from a mail order company of a shrub, and you ultimately wanted it in this big giant container. Sometimes it's best not to go from this 4-inch pot into that large container. You definitely increase the risk of drowning them big time. Most plants that you buy, if you buy a 7-gallon shrub that's 3 or 4 feet tall, wherever you'd buy that shrub, it's probably been planted several times. Nurserymen don't jump from a little rooted cutting into that big giant pot. They usually will plant them into 1-gallon pots and then 3-gallon pots and then into 7-gallon pots. Like I say, mainly the reason is overwatering. It's super easy to overwater, but also plants that are aggressive rooting, if you were to, you can't leave, most shrubs and trees can't stay in the same container mix for a very long time. And if you go directly into that big pot and it roots out, over time it's going to become super, super root bound. And what I find is, if I take a small plant and put it into a big pot, I end up with kind of a small plant and then the roots have rooted completely out into it. And then I ended up with a weird stunted plant. Whereas if I put them into a gallon pot and kind of grow them as long as they'll tolerate being in that pot, and then I pot them into a 3 and then I pot them into a 7, I end up with a quite large, vigorous plant, and I still don't have a root bound plant in my in that big container. If that makes any sense. It just extends the period of time that you can keep the plant in a container. If I jump right to the biggest container, it ends up super root bound, maybe in 2 years. If I stage it and pot it up over the course of 3 or 4 years, then I can maybe be able to keep that as a container plant for 4 or 5 years. Hope that makes sense. And the last question will be, somebody asked me about planting Hellebores and Hosta near a smoke bush. Just wanted to make sure they would compete with an existing smoke bush. That's 2 really good choices. Hellebores and Hosta are both super, super drought tolerant shade perennials. Those would be very good. Those would be very good choices. And I had one other one that I was thinking about. Oh, on the bulb coming up too early question, they had also asked about drought tolerant plants. They have a place in the North Carolina mountains, and they were asking about drought tolerant plants that they can use there because they're there infrequently. And that's a very good question if you have a place where you're visiting infrequently. Grasses, are always going to be a good choice if you're looking for perennial things, being drought tolerant and be able to leave and come back and not have any maintenance. And then native perennials, you know, echinacea is actually, our coneflowers are native to the western part of North Carolina, and they would be a good choice. If you want an ornamental tree, deciduous magnolias grow beautifully in the North Carolina mountains, and most everybody watching me, and they're super drought tolerant, industrial, and are bloom reliably in the spring every year. So, and then look around while you're up there. I always say just go to, you know, look at what other people are doing while you're there, especially on entryways to subdivisions and that kind of thing, because those tend to be landscapers tend to use tougher plants in those situations because nobody's there maintaining them. And so just, you know, pay attention to that. But definitely recommend a deciduous magnolia if you want a drought tolerant tree that you can plant this spring and then leave and not worry too much about. So don't forget to leave a comment down below here and over on Instagram and on Facebook for a chance to win the Corona Pruners. Thanks again to Corona for participating in the giveaway, and thanks to you guys for participating in these question and answer videos every week.